Okay, picture this. An invisible, highly intelligent, multi-layered umbrella covering the entire Indian subcontinent. Kind of wild to imagine, right? Well, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into what is honestly one of the most fascinating technological chess matches happening in global defense right now. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar shield, and honestly, understanding how this thing works and who is actually building it reveals a whole lot about how the balance of global power is shifting right under our feet. So let's get into it.
To really grasp where we are today, we have to start with this massive, almost unprecedented geopolitical dilemma. Seriously, think about this. What happens when a superpower flat out refuses to sell its absolute best weapon to its most loyal, deepest-pocketed customer? For decades now, Russia has been India's absolute go-to defense supplier. But when New Delhi came knocking for Moscow's ultimate crown jewel, the S-500 air defense system, they hit a massive brick wall. And to understand the real shockwaves of that refusal, we first need to understand the sheer, mind-bending power of the technology itself.
All right, Section 1, the ultimate missile shield.
So think of a layered air defense system, literally like a giant high-tech canopy. India's current setup, the S-400 system, that's the broad fabric of the umbrella, right? It's doing a great job protecting against regional everyday threats. But the S-500, man, that is the near-space roof. It extends that protection so far upward and outward into altitudes and speeds that legacy systems literally couldn't even dream of touching. The technological jump between these two systems is, well, it's absolutely staggering. The S-400 relies on what's called blast fragmentation. Imagine throwing a baseball, and right as it gets close to another baseball in midair, it explodes into a cloud of shrapnel to take it out. Pretty impressive. But the S-500 Prometheus? It uses hit-to-kill kinetics. It physically collides with the target. That is literally the equivalent of catching a speeding bullet with another bullet in the pitch-black darkness of space. It's wild.
And just consider the sheer scale of this thing for a second. We're talking about interceptors that have a 600-kilometer range, reaching altitudes of 200 kilometers. That is the literal edge of space, folks. And perhaps the most terrifying part for any incoming threat is the reaction time. Once its radar spots a target, the S-500 can calculate, aim, and fire in just 3 to 4 seconds. 3 seconds!
Because of that insane speed and raw kinetic energy, these interceptors aren't just looking for standard fighter jets. Oh no. They are actively hunting hypersonic glide vehicles traveling at Mach 5, intercontinental ballistic missiles, stealth aircraft, and, get this, even low Earth orbit satellites. Yeah, actual satellites. This is a massive quantum leap into near-space warfare, and it is exactly why India wanted this technology so badly.
Moving right along to Section 2, a friendship tested.
Despite the deep historical trust between the two nations, Russian officials have been pretty blunt. They've made it clear that their immediate focus is satisfying their own urgent national security requirements. Their production lines are currently totally maxed out protecting Moscow and their own airspace, so until their domestic demand is met, which experts say might not happen until the 2030s, the S-500 is simply off the table for export, period.
But actually, there's a hidden Achilles heel here that we need to talk about. As the UK think tank RUSI pointed out, Russia's top-tier radars rely heavily on highly specific beryllium oxide ceramics. And guess where they come from? A single company in Kazakhstan. Think about how a shortage of just one type of microchip practically halted global car production a few years back. It's the exact same concept. If anything disrupts this one specific Kazakh factory, Russia's ability to produce these advanced radars is critically compromised.
All right, Section 3, the threat next door. We have to look at India's neighborhood because the geopolitical situation there is evolving incredibly fast. Case in point, during the May 2025 cross-border clashes with Pakistan, what became known as Operation Sindoor, India actively used its existing S-400 systems to neutralize aerial threats. Now, this real-world success proved the system works, which is great, but it also really highlighted India's urgent, pressing need to expand its shield. Neighboring powers are heavily modernizing their weapons, and India absolutely needs to keep pace.
And the financial weight of all this? It's massive. Back in 2018, India dropped $5.43 billion, yeah, billion with a B, for 5 squadrons of the S-400. But thanks to global supply chain chaos, the final deliveries have been delayed until 2026. So what does that mean? It leaves a temporary but highly vulnerable gap in the sky, a gap that New Delhi is, understandably, highly motivated to fill right now.
Which leads us to Section 4, the sanctions tightrope. Filling that defense gap requires a ridiculously delicate balancing act. Look at the tension here. Under a U.S. law known as COTSA, any country making significant military purchases from Russia faces strict, sweeping economic sanctions. So India is essentially walking a geopolitical tightrope. On one side you have Moscow, their legacy historic defense supplier. And on the other you have Washington, which is their absolutely crucial strategic ally in the Indo-Pacific. One slip and it's a diplomatic nightmare.
There's actually a great quote from Ashley J. Tellis at the Carnegie Endowment that captures Washington's dilemma perfectly. The U.S. knows full well that India's Russian-made gear is meant as a deterrent against shared regional adversaries like China. It's not aimed at the West. So slapping CAATSA sanctions on India would severely damage the Indo-U.S. partnership. It would just be fundamentally counterproductive for American interests.
But here's the thing. Despite looming Western sanctions, New Delhi is not abandoning Moscow. The Indo-Russian Relos Pact from January 2026 proves it without a doubt. By agreeing to the reciprocal stationing of 3,000 troops, plus warships and aircraft in each other's territories, they are sending a very clear, very powerful message to the world. Their deep military integration, it's enduring, and it's evolving.
Okay, finally, Section 5, Project Kusha takes flight.
So, put yourself in India's shoes. Deny the S-500, facing massive delays on the S-400, and constantly navigating the threat of Western sanctions. What do you actually do? Well, the answer is Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's a massive, sweeping shift toward domestic self-reliance. Basically, if they can't buy the ultimate umbrella, they're just going to build their own. Enter Project Kusha. And Project Kusha is moving at absolute breakneck speed. I mean, from prototype manufacturing happening in 2025 to successful initial testing expected by 2026, they are aiming for full system deployment by 2030. They're actually forging 3 completely indigenous missiles, the M1, M2, and M3. And these are capable of striking targets up to 400 kilometers away, which will permanently bridge that defense gap alongside the S-400. But honestly, it's not just about the hardware. It's about the brain powering the whole thing. This $2.3 billion project ties directly into India's Integrated Air Command and Control System, or IACCs. Think of it like a giant nationwide nervous system that flawlessly merges military and civilian radars. It completely automates threat prioritization and cross-domain tracking. Basically, it weaves this impenetrable, highly intelligent web over the entire Indian airspace. It is seriously next-level stuff.
So, we started this journey with a refused sale, and we end with the birth of a cutting-edge, entirely domestic defense ecosystem. And that leaves us with one absolutely critical question to ponder. By transitioning from a dependent arms buyer to the self-reliant architect of its own near-space shield, will India's Project Kusha fundamentally rewrite the entire balance of power in Asia? It's a massive question, and honestly, the answer is going to shape global defense for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, guys. Keep your eyes on the skies.